A towering cowboy accidentally bumps into the young banker's daughter during a crowded fair. What starts as an awkward moment spirals into an unforgettable adventure, as neither can escape the other, and hearts begin to collide in the most unexpected ways. The morning sun glinted off the glass towers of the city's financial district, where the young banker's daughter, Eliza Grant, moved with the precision and poise that had defined her life. Every step she took was measured, every glance calculated. At just 22, she had inherited more than her father's wealth. She had inherited his insistence on control, order, and the unshakable belief that life could be planned down to the last detail. Her days were full of schedules, meetings, and spreadsheets. A life as neat and contained as the tailored suits she wore. Eliza prided herself on being unflappable, on keeping her emotions tucked neatly away, like her meticulously organized files. But today, there was something in the air, an unusual tension, like the world itself was whispering that control might not be enough. She didn't know it yet, but fate was about to intrude on her perfectly ordered world in the most unpredictable way. Meanwhile, far from the polished streets and financial towers, Colton Hayes, a towering cowboy with a heart as big as his frame, was wandering into the city for the first time in years. He carried with him the dust of open plains on his boots, and the casual confidence of someone who had spent his life mastering rope and cattle rather than ledgers and offices. Where Eliza moved in straight lines, Colton moved in arcs, expansive, unpredictable, impossible to confine. His presence alone seemed to distort the meticulous order of any room he entered, bending the world just enough to make people notice. Fate, as it often does, conspired that morning at a bustling city fair. Eliza had reluctantly agreed to accompany her friends to the event. A brief escape from her regimented life. She had expected mild discomfort, maybe awkward social interactions. But nothing could have prepared her for the first moment she saw Colton, towering over the crowd, laughter rumbling like a small storm. And Colton, for his part, had never seen anyone move with such precision, a living embodiment of control, grace, and determination, standing in stark contrast to his untamed open-air existence. As they collided literally, in the midst of a crowded game booth, a string of chaos ensued. Tickets scattered, a stack of plush toys teetered dangerously. And in that instant, the two worlds' rigid structure and wild freedom met with a force neither could have anticipated. Eliza's carefully maintained composure wavered for the first time in years, while Colton's easy grin hinted at a mischievous understanding. This encounter would not end neatly, and neither of them would remain the same. The chaos of the crowded fair had barely begun to settle when the inevitable happened. Eliza, still clutching the stack of plush toys that had almost toppled, tried to step back gracefully, her heels clicking against the wooden floor of the game booth. But Colton, unaware of the delicate choreography required to navigate the human sea around him, moved forward at exactly the wrong moment. Before anyone could react, their paths collided again. This time, it was more than a gentle bump. Colton's broad shoulder pressed against hers, and in her attempt to regain balance, Eliza's arm slipped into his chest. The proximity was startling. Her carefully maintained personal space, the invisible boundary she had built around herself her whole life, was breached. She froze, her heart racing as Colton instinctively steadied her. I'm so sorry," Eliza stammered, stepping back only to find that her retreat was blocked by Colton's massive frame. He smiled sheepishly, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "No harm done. You're, surprisingly sturdy." Eliza blinked. "Surprisingly sturdy," she echoed, unsure whether to be insulted or baffled. She opened her mouth to answer, but at that moment, the game booth's railing wobbled dangerously under the weight of an enthusiastic crowd surge. Colton, quick as lightning despite his size, reached out to brace the structure, and in doing so, accidentally pressed a bit too close, wrapping his large hands around her arms to keep her steady. And that was it. The moment froze. Eliza's face heated, and she realized she was caught in a scenario that was simultaneously absurd, tense, and utterly impossible to control. Colton, for his part, seemed entirely oblivious to the electricity crackling between them, focused instead on keeping both of them upright. A small crowd had gathered, some laughing, some gawking, while Eliza desperately tried to disentangle herself, but every movement seemed to tighten Colton's hold, accidental, protective, and yet strangely intimate. She realized, with a mix of frustration and fascination, that no matter how much she tried to free herself, that giant cowboy wasn't letting go. As their eyes met across the slight distance, something unspoken passed between them. For the first time, Eliza felt a crack in the armor she had built around her life, a moment of vulnerability she hadn't anticipated, and Colton, he still grinned, completely unaware of the tension he'd just ignited. It was only the beginning. The fair, the crowd, and the chaotic collision of two worlds had set the stage for a story neither of them could have planned. A story that would test boundaries, force them into impossible situations, and ultimately teach them that sometimes the tightest grip isn't something you escape. It's something you can't help but hold on to. The crowd around the game booth began to disperse, but Eliza and Colton were still stuck in their awkward embrace, not by force, but by circumstance and sheer hilarity of the situation. The railing had shifted just enough that stepping apart meant risking a tumble of both of them, and neither wanted to be responsible for an embarrassing scene in front of onlookers. Colton, towering above her with an easy grin, tilted his head. "Well, I guess we're stuck, huh?" His voice was deep, amused, and oddly comforting. Eliza blinked at him, exasperated. "Stuck? We are not stuck. I am perfectly capable of..." She stopped, realizing that the way he was holding her made every word feel like it could topple them both. "Relax," Colton said, adjusting slightly so that the booth's wobble wouldn't send either of them tumbling. "I've got this. You just stay still." Eliza's heart thumped in a way she hadn't expected. Stay still. The words were simple, practical, yet they carried an intensity that made her cheeks warm. She glanced up at him, trying to focus on his expression rather than the proximity. But his calm, steady gaze made it impossible. For someone so large, so imposing, he radiated a strange gentleness that made her feel simultaneously safe and flustered. They attempted to step aside, but every movement seemed to keep them entangled in laughter and chaos. Her heel caught on a loose plank. He instinctively grabbed her arm, and for a moment, it felt like the universe had engineered this awkward collision just to force them together. As they navigated through the booth, something remarkable happened. Their banter began to flow naturally. You handle these crowds a lot?" Eliza asked, trying to regain control of the conversation and herself. Colton chuckled. "Crowds, not really. But I handle cows. Same principle. Stay calm, stay big, don't fall over." Eliza couldn't help but laugh, a sound that startled even her. "Cows, really? Yep. Big, unpredictable, stubborn. Sometimes they kick. His grin was impossible to resist, warm and teasing. By the time they reached the other side of the booth, the initial embarrassment had shifted. Eliza felt a curious sense of admiration for him, for his strength, his humor, and the way he remained unshakable even in chaos. And Colton, he noticed the way she carried herself with precision, poise, and quiet authority, and he was quietly impressed. The tension between them had shifted subtly from awkwardness to curiosity. A mutual recognition of each other's worlds, her ordered, structured life, and his vast, untamed freedom. For the first time, Eliza wondered what it would be like to let someone in, to relinquish a little control, and for Colton, she became a puzzle he genuinely wanted to understand. It was clear, this encounter was far from over. That tight accidental grip that had brought them together wasn't just a matter of physical proximity. It was a spark. One that promised laughter, mischief, and perhaps something neither of them had expected. Connection. Just as Eliza and Colton thought the worst of their awkward entanglement was behind them, a sudden commotion erupted at the fair's centerpiece. The giant Ferris wheel. A loose harness had caused a small panic, and the operator shouted for help. Without thinking, Colton grabbed Eliza's hand. "We've got to help," he said, his voice calm but urgent. Eliza hesitated. She wasn't used to impulsive action, much less doing anything with someone as unpredictable as Colton. But something in his determined eyes made her trust him, even as her carefully maintained composure threatened to crumble. They ran together, weaving through the panicked crowd. Colton's long strides effortlessly matched with her smaller, precise steps, and for a moment they moved as one, a bizarre, chaotic, and oddly perfect team. Reaching the Ferris wheel, Colton assessed the situation quickly, his cowboy practicality shining through. Eliza, surprisingly resourceful, offered instructions and calculations, her analytical mind complementing his instinctive actions. Together, they stabilized the loose harness and helped passengers disembark safely. As the last rider stepped down, breathing heavy but smiling, Eliza and Colton leaned against each other, sides pressed together from adrenaline and proximity. The crowd had cleared, leaving them in the soft glow of the setting sun. Golden light reflecting off the metal Ferris wheel and bathing their flushed faces. For a long moment, neither spoke. Their eyes met, and Eliza felt her heart skip a beat. Colton's easy grin softened into something warmer, almost vulnerable. "You know," he said quietly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "you're tougher than you look." Eliza's lips quirked into a small, genuine smile. "And you're impossible to ignore." The tension of the day, the awkward collisions, the chaotic chase, the accidental closeness culminated in that silent acknowledgement. They had been thrust together by chance, by chaos, and by a tight grip neither could deny. In that moment, admiration and curiosity gave way to a spark of something deeper. A connection neither of them expected, but both felt undeniable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they walked away side by side, laughter slowly returning, their previous awkwardness replaced by a shared understanding. Sometimes, the most unexpected encounters lead to the most unforgettable bonds. By the time the fair had quieted and the sun disappeared behind the city skyline, Eliza and Colton found themselves walking side by side along the empty paths, their earlier chaos replaced by a calm, comfortable rhythm. The adrenaline of the Ferris wheel incident had faded, but its effect lingered in the flutter of her heart, the warmth in his eyes, and the subtle awareness that neither of them would forget this day. Eliza, usually so composed and precise, allowed herself a small laugh. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I actually enjoyed that. Colton chuckled, tipping his hat with playful charm. See, sometimes chaos is fun, especially when you're stuck with the right person. They stopped at the edge of the fairgrounds, where the city lights reflected off the glass towers. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, each seeing something new: strength, humor, courage, and a spark that neither had anticipated. You know, Eliza said softly, I usually plan everything. I like knowing exactly what comes next. Colton smiled, a hint of mischief still in his gaze. And I usually just go wherever life takes me. She tilted her head, considering, maybe. Sometimes it's worth letting life take the lead. He extended his hand, not as a cowboy offering guidance, but as a partner offering trust. She hesitated only a second before slipping her hand into his, the connection warm and reassuring. As they walked back toward the city streets, side by side, laughter and conversation flowing naturally, it was clear that their worlds had collided in a way neither of them could have planned, and yet it was perfect. Eliza realized that sometimes letting go of control didn't mean losing herself. And Colton realized that meeting someone extraordinary didn't mean taming his freedom. It meant discovering a companion who could match his heart in unexpected ways. In the end, the tight, accidental grip that had brought them together was no longer a source of awkward tension. It had become a symbol of connection, trust, and the first spark of something beautiful. And as the night settled over the city, both knew one thing for certain: this was just the beginning of an adventure neither would ever forget.